Hey, so I'm Ben Nimmo. I work at the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab, and I'm desperately trying to understand everything that happens online and try and make sense of it. And when I finish that, I will have a cup of tea, but we're not quite there yet.
That was a quick intro. So, I'll start. I really am enjoying to get the chance to ask questions for Ben because I don't. The Atlantic Council is kind of an opaque entity for me, so I think that this will be very interesting. So your paper was on bot networks, but one of the things that I wanted to focus on, and I think that a lot of people are asking questions about, are what happens, as these campaigns evolve and as, say, artificial intelligence and the ability to mimic humans evolves. So we're dealing with the scale of a kind of typical bot campaign, but you start to involve kind of very sophisticated natural language processing and very kind of deception or a lot of deceiving activity. How do you deal with that and tackle those types of larger campaigns as the sophistication grows and as the arms race kind of perpetuates? That would be my first question.
It's going to get harder and harder. And what we're seeing, particularly since February this year, when Twitter toughened up its terms of service on spam automation, the botnets that I've been seeing since then have been a lot smaller, and they've been trying a lot harder to hide. And we're seeing more and more what you might think of as cyborg accounts. So there are accounts which are posting at bot-like rates. They're posting 200-300 times a day for months on end. But if you actually break down the traffic, maybe 10 or 15% of those posts look like they're authored. And so you're getting an account which it's clearly automated. It's posting massive amounts of content. Much of it is retweets or it's shares from websites. But in there, you're getting replies. It's actually pinging people with its own messages. And that makes a really difficult problem for the platform. Because the easy way to go after an account is to say it's fully automated. There isn't a human being there at all. And if there isn't a human being there at all, well, just get rid of it. As soon as you have obvious traces of a human being in the system, it's much, much harder to deal with. And there are the bot herders are already finding all kinds of ways to try and make themselves look more human. I mean, my favorite botnet of the last 2 years has been a network which was primarily designed to attract male users towards Russian pornography sites. But in order to make it look more human, all these accounts were posting text posts in between times. And obviously, to have a text post, you've got to be able to generate it from somewhere. And so what the bot herder had done, they'd got hold of the Google Books version of Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, and they were crawling that, and they were just pinging Jane Austen quotes in between the pornography quotes. And it was fascinating, because if you purely looked at the numbers, this was an account which was mixing in text posts with links, with photos, so it looked like there was a blend of human activity, but it was just run off a script which was linking Jane Austen.
So on this topic, is there a way where we can see success or longer term success rather than fighting these types of things, or rather than a defensive posture? Is there any way for organizations and forensics to kind of take this to empower users and empower citizens to understand more about these networks, regardless of the sophistication or in spite of the sophistication? Is there any way we can empower users to understand more about not just the source, but the networks in which their information tends to flow or circulate through? Does that make sense? Or it's not so much the news source, but how they end up being exposed to certain types of information through coordinated networks involving humans and also machines.
There are always skills that you can teach people, and the great thing now is that there's a real desire to learn. The number of times that I've been asked in the last couple of years by journalists and just by people online, how can you tell if this is a bot or not? It's growing exponentially, so there's a real interest there. And some of the core skills are really simple, like reverse searching an image. It's something you can teach a class of 9-year-olds, and I know because I have. And it's hilarious. These kids all went away and started reverse searching Donald Trump's image to check if he was real. Chance would be a fine thing. But you can teach people the basic skills, and you can teach people the basic understanding that maybe this account that you're seeing is the tip of an iceberg. And you don't need, if you're like a civilian user, there are fairly basic things you can do. You can reverse search the profile picture. You can text search the post you're looking at and see how many other accounts have done it. You don't have to have the deep forensics just to be able to post a text search into a search bar. So there are things you can do, but the way I think about it, 3 or 4 years ago, particularly on the political scene, political bots were in virgin territory. Nobody knew about them. Nobody was keeping an eye on them. You've now got a whole industry which is out there looking out for the bots, and the bot herders know it. So we're now into a much more cat and mouse game. The platforms are onto this, open source researchers are onto it, the bot herders are onto it. So it's going to be a question of who gets cleverer quicker. And that's just here to stay.
So in the past few months, I'll just use an anecdote. I've seen the willingness of platforms to take down, say, along these lines, cache versions of certain sites or certain pages or Facebook accounts. So it used to be, if an account was taken down, you would have days, or maybe even sometimes, in some cases, weeks, to recover the cache from, say, Google. But the speed at which these things are taken down, more recently, we're talking minutes to hours. And this involves more of a question or a kind of discussion topic around data access. And there's obviously a fine balance between the privacy of users, protecting the privacy of users, and giving researchers and academics the ability to gather data, to understand more about what happened and make sense of things, and in a way also hold platforms to account and provide data to the public and for reporting. How does this balance work in your opinion? Because you are involved in an organization that works alongside Facebook, for example. So where do we draw the line for data access and the ability for platforms to allow peeks into data that could be otherwise sensitive, or is there a way we can manage that in the future?
And it's an ongoing conversation, and we're really only at the start of the conversation there. And each platform is different, right? I mean, Reddit took down the Internet Research Agency accounts and left them all up so people could see them. So at one end of the spectrum, you've got that transparency. But you really need to be factoring in, you've got the platforms, you've also got the privacy advocates, and then you've got the transparency advocates. So you've really got to be able to triangulate between those 3 different imperatives, which are all pulling in different directions. And this is where you're really fragmented, and every platform is its own thing, and it's going to have its own particular set of responses. But it's a conversation that we absolutely need to push, because the more information we can have about how it has worked, the better we'll be able to predict how it's going to work in the future. And that's really critical.